Hi, everyone. Good to be back with you again. Son of man, take a tile, a clay tablet, lay it in front of you, and portray upon it the city of Jerusalem. Lay siege against it. Build a fort against it. Cast a mount against it. He's there putting a model together, I guess, right there on the ground in front of him. Set the camp against it. Set battering rams against it round about. He's got a whole model of a besieged city there. Now, take an iron pan and set it for a wall of iron between you and the city, and set your face against it. It will be besieged. You will lay siege against it. This will be a sign to the house of Israel. Now, a lot of icons in here, and you have to ask yourself, okay, what does this mean? I think this wall of iron could be one of two things. It could be the fact that the Babylonians have surrounded the city and they are like a wall of iron. Or it could simply be, you see, you're going to try to talk me out of this, folks, but you're going to be talking to a wall of iron. I am not going to hear you anymore. Anyway, this shall be a sign to the house of Israel. Now, we're going to run into this ambiguity of the expression house of Israel again and again. There had been, not in living memory, but in the knowledge of the people, a time when the house of Judah and the house of Israel were separate body politics. And it's a case of saying that not all Israelites were Jews, but all Jews were Israelites. So before the divided kingdom, there was only the house of Israel. When Ezekiel speaks of the house of Israel, then, he may be speaking of all Israel or all Israel that was left, depending on the context. It's problematic, though. We're going to see that as we go along. Now he tells Ezekiel to do something. One of the reasons I'm glad I'm not a prophet, and I would not volunteer for this job. Lie on your left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that you shall lie upon it, you shall bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon you the years of their iniquity according to the number of the days, 390 days, so shall you bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. Now, commentators say that he didn't necessarily lie on that left side 24/7, but that some portion of the day he lay on his left side forming and talking about the besiegement of the city of Jerusalem. Indications are that he was up for part of each day. They see that in the context. There's also a textual issue here. The Septuagint version says it's 190 days, not 390 days. Now, when you have accomplished these days, and again, it's a day for a year for all the wickedness of Israel, when you've done that, lie on your right side, and you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah for 40 days. I have appointed you each day for a year. Therefore you shall set your face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and your arm shall be uncovered, and you shall prophesy against it. Now, this section is just loaded with icons. Some we get, some we have to guess at. Bearing of the arm is one of these things. For example, Isaiah 52, verse 10. The Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. You know, I think this bearing of the arm is probably like our expression, roll up your sleeves, get to work, roll up your sleeves and do this. And I suppose that's what this means. Ezekiel in this case, bared his arms. He rolled up his sleeves. Now, I have found no agreement as to the times that are being referred to in this section, the 390 days or the 190, and then the 40, as to when they start, when they end. But I think we look at, there appear to be too many variables in this for us to be able to sort that out. The question we have to ask, though, is what is the underlying meaning of the passage? The duration of the punishment is related to the time Israel sinned, a day for a year. The message is the justice of God will not sleep forever. Sooner or later, all that stuff's got to be paid for. And the distinction between the house of Israel and the house of Judah cannot be ignored here. Some time ago, I was reading in Halley's Bible Handbook and came across the lists of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, and it was kind of interesting looking at it. because as it went down through the kings of Judah, it said good king, bad king. There'd be one that was a restorer of things. The other one was bad as they could get. And so it was kind of up and down in the house of Judah. When it came to the kings of Israel, the way they read was bad, 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 worse, bad, the worst. There was not in all the long history of the house of Israel ever a revival, a restoration, or a turning back to God under the leadership of a good king like there had been in Judah. So in part, this accounts for the difference in these time periods. And yet, the siege is laid against Jerusalem for all of it. The final siege of Jerusalem is yet a future event. But Ezekiel, it seems, is being called upon here to illustrate for everyone the fact that in the course of their history, they have sinned against God again and again and again, and there is a price to be paid for it. Verse 8, Behold, I will lay bands upon you. You shall not turn from one side to the other until you have ended the days of your siege. When I first read that, I thought, what? He's going to lie here on one side for 390 days? He'll die. I mean, to me, I got to turn over several times in the night or I can't get up in the morning. And so here he is, not on a comfortable bed, but on the ground, and God's going to lay bands upon him so he can't turn over. Now, he says, Take to you wheat and barley and beans and lentils and millet and fitches. Put them in one vessel, and make your bread from this according to the number of days you lie upon your side, 390 days, or Septuagint, 190 days. Give or take 200 years, it isn't going to make a whole lot of difference in the pain you suffer. Your meat which you shall eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day from time to time you can eat it. You can have a whole day's worth in front of you, and you eat it when you feel like it. You drink water by measure, the sixth part of a hin. From time to time you shall drink. In other words, whenever you feel like it, you can have a drink. Whenever you feel like it, you can munch on your wheat or your barley cakes. You eat it like barley cakes. You shall bake it with dung that comes out of man in their sight. What he means by that is you use the dung as fuel to bake it on. Oh, that was just a little bit too much for Ezekiel. He really couldn't quite handle that. But he's going to be pretty miserable. Everything about this, though, is an icon. It's something to see with the eyes, not just hear with words. It was an object lesson. Now, we all know this is true. Teaching is far better if you can appeal to more than one sense at the same time. That's why so many speakers use PowerPoint. They will put their notes up on the screen, a little bit here and a little bit at a time, and they help you focus in on what it is they're trying to say. I don't use PowerPoint very much because that's not my style, but the visualization of these things is important, and that's what he was called upon to do, to give him an object lesson. And he was going to lose a lot of weight in this period of time, and everybody was going to notice this, how gaunt he was becoming, and even his becoming gaunt was a bad thing, was a part of the image that was being conveyed. And the Lord said, Even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles where I am going to drive them. And then I said, Lord God, behold, my soul has not been polluted. My youth up until now I have not eaten of anything that dies of itself or is torn in pieces. I've never had any abominable flesh in my mouth. And God said, Okay, I'll give you cow's dung instead of man's dung, and you'll prepare your bread with it. That may still sound strange to you, but the truth is that those stuff can be gathered up once it's all dried out. It does make fuel. You can keep yourself warm with it, and you can even cook over it if you have to. So, it's interesting. You have to follow God's instructions, but there's nothing in the world wrong with you going back to God and saying, Lord, please don't ask me to do this. I shouldn't have to do this. I've been this good all my life. Peter was the same way when they lowered that thing in front of him and said, Rise, Peter, kill and eat, and it had every snakes and cockroaches in it. And he said, Not so, Lord. I've never done this from my youth. And God didn't make him do it either. So he said to me, Son of man, Look, I'm going to break the staff of bread in Jerusalem. They will eat bread by weight and with care. They will drink water by measure and with astonishment, that they may want bread and water and be astonished one with another and consume away for their iniquity. Do you still want to be a prophet? This is a tough way to lose weight. Do you still want to be a prophet? It's an awfully hard bed to lie on. I don't. That's one of the reasons. This right here is one of the reasons why I keep telling people and remind them, I am not a prophet. I am not looking for that job. But Ezekiel's not done. He says to him, Son of man, I want you to take a sharp knife and a barber's razor. Cause it to pass upon your head and upon your beard. So just shave your head, shave your beard. Let's get everything off here. And take balances to weigh and divide the hair. You shall burn with fire a third part of it in the midst of the city, when the days of the siege are fulfilled. And you shall take a third part and hack around it with a knife. And a third part you shall scatter in the wind, and I'll draw out a sword after them. You shall also take a few of them, bind them in your skirts. Then I'll take some of them and throw them in the fire. For thereof shall a fire come forth to the house of Israel. So, after the days of lying on his side, representing the days of the siege, he had to shave off all the hair of his head, beard, and everything. He separated into thirds, using scales to weigh it, so he got it really pretty precise. 1/3 he put on the Jerusalem tile and set fire to it. Another third he laid out and hacked around on it with a knife. A third part he tossed up into the wind to scatter it and blow it away. He held out a few enough to count them, and tied them in his clothes. I take it that this is a group of people that are going to escape the worst of this. But then as an afterthought, he took some of those out and cast them into the fire. So really, very few people are going to survive this thing. All these things are object lessons. They are icons, acted out icons before the eyes of the elders who were there. I often speak of verbal icons. You know, they're verbal for us, but for Ezekiel and the people seeing him, they were really quite vivid. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure out what that meant, did it? Not at that time, not after all they've been through. It will take rather more to discern what it might mean for you and me, for those of us living in our day and our age. Thus saith the Lord, this is Jerusalem. I have set it in the midst of the nations and the countries round about her, and she has changed my judgments unto wickedness more than the nations, and my statutes more than the countries round about her. For they have refused my judgments and my statutes, and have not walked in them. You know, it's a lot like us today. It's not that we didn't have them. We have had them. We have known the Bible. We have actually believed the Bible as a people. Even with our Constitution, we had a system and a way of doing things. And it wasn't as though we didn't know them. It's that we have cast them off. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, because you multiplied more than the nations round about you and have not walked in my statutes. You've been blessed. You've gotten big. You've really done lots of stuff, but you won't live my way. You have not done according to the judgments of the nations round about you. You haven't even done as well as they've done. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I, even I, am against you. You know, it's one thing to have God walk off and leave us and say, I don't care about you anymore. It's another thing to have him set his face against us. And that's a lot of what Ezekiel's doing in this thing. He is sort of like God, putting a steel pan or an iron pan between himself and the people in that city. I will do in you, he said, what I have not done, and what I won't do it any more, the like, except because of all your abominations. So, I suppose we can think this won't happen to us, because he said, I'm not going to do it again. And yet, if we make the same mistake, why should we expect a different outcome? Oh, the details will be different. I mean, we're not going to be besieged in a city with an army around about us and inside walls. But something like it? Oh, I think it's quite possible. Therefore, he told him, he said, the fathers shall eat the sons in the midst of you. The sons shall eat their fathers, and I will execute judgments in you, and the whole remnant of you I will scatter unto all the winds. Oh, it's an awful thought. But, in some of those sieges in the good old days, when they'd put up their armies together, would gather around these cities and lock them up, and the people would stand there and defend their walls. When they ran out of food, cannibalism was not that uncommon. Whenever they couldn't have anything else to eat, they ate one another. Therefore, as I live, says the Lord God, surely because you have defiled my sanctuary with all your detestable things and all your abominations, I will diminish you. I will not spare, neither will I have any pity. Okay, let's explain, God says, the significance of the shaving of the head. Already we kind of have an idea, but here it comes. A third part of you will die with the pestilence and the famine in the city. Famine often leads to pestilence, so about a third of your population is going to die. A third part of you then will fall by the sword round about you, which means 2/3 of the population is gone. I will scatter the third part into all the winds, and I'll draw out a sword after them. Now, if we take this as a whole, it has to include the captivity of the northern house of Israel. Otherwise, there was no need to draw the distinction between the two of them, even though the final picture of the siege is against Jerusalem. But the northern house of Israel was done the same way. They were besieged. They actually had to then go into captivity. They were scattered all to the four winds, and nobody ever knew what happened to them. The lost tribes of Israel. Thus shall my anger be accomplished, and I will cause my fury to rest upon them, and I will finally find comfort, and they shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it in my zeal when I have accomplished my fury in them. And let me remind you of something here. One of the reasons why the prophet comes, even when we know he's not going to be listened to, even though we won't pay a bit of attention to him, it is so that when the evil comes, people will not assume it's just karma, it's just bad luck, it's just accident that it worked out this way. It wasn't because of the evil things that we have done. So, a handful of prophets will always come along, and they'll always tell people in God's name what's coming. It's going to come down around your ears just like it always has. And I want you to know when it happens that a prophet has been among you, that indeed this is God's doing. I will make you waste, he said, a reproach among the nations round about you in the sight of every one that passes by. It shall be a reproach and a taunt and an instruction and an astonishment to the nations about you, when I execute judgment on you in anger and in fury and in furious rebukes. I, the Lord, have spoken it. I hate to read that. I hate it. The realization not merely that God has forsaken us, but that he's against us and turned his hand against us. And candidly, folks, we got no more reason to expect him not to do it with us than Israel did, because we've done stuff just as bad. I don't know if Israel had gotten rid of 40 million innocent lives in abortion in those days. I doubt it. When I send upon them the evil arrows of famine, which shall be for their destruction, and which I will send to destroy you, I will increase the famine upon you, and will break your staff of bread. I'll send famine, evil beasts, they will bereave you, and pestilence and blood shall pass through you, and I will bring the sword on you. I, the Lord, have spoken it. This used to be invoked by some as a prophecy against America and Britain in the last days. I'm not so sure it still shouldn't be, in principle. How many months has it been since we, as a nation, felt invincible? Funny how many movies have been made showing this or that English-speaking country, Australia, United States, or what have you, being turned into a desolation at some time in the future. Probably through nuclear war, but not necessarily. It hasn't been so impossible that movie producers haven't wanted to think about where it might go. That said, I don't expect a literal fulfillment of Ezekiel in the last days. I think, though, what happened to Jerusalem is a type of what is going to happen to Israel in the last days. It was a type of what happened to Israel in 70 A.D. when the Romans came through and so destroyed the city that not long afterward you could go by it and not even realize there had been a city there. Not one stone on top of another that had not been thrown down. I have said more than once, I expect yet another Holocaust in Israel. Are you as confident now as you were, say, 5 years ago, that something like that's not coming? Well, I don't know where you were 5 years ago, and I certainly a long time ago expected something like this to be happening, although it was not as vivid in my sight as it is today. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a very good predictor, but I have a feeling this is going on, this particular downtrend that we're in is going to go on for a lot longer than many people think. We may have some sort of recovery, but it will be years before all that real estate that has been overbuilt will be soaked up. One writer opined that a lot of housing developments are going to be home to vandals and rats, and it may end up being worse than that. Mark writes from Northern Virginia. He calls himself a recent, long-time listener, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it. He asks, does the Bible refer to a person having levels of faith, or does one either have faith or doesn't have faith? Well, I can easily understand why a person would ask that question, because there are incidences where it kind of sounds like, the disciples asked Jesus to increase our faith. He said, if you had faith at all, that you could move mountains. But then there's this illustration out of the 9th chapter of Mark where the poor guy has got a son that's demon-possessed and having terrible time. The demon will throw him into a fire to try to destroy him and throw him into the water to try to drown him. He went to Jesus and said, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. It's Mark 9:22. And Jesus said, if you can believe, all things are possible to him that believes. And the father of the child cried out and said, oh, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Basically what he's saying is, I believe in you, I have faith, I just need help on the other side of this thing. Also, there's 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 3. Paul wrote and said, we're bound to thank God always for you, brethren, as it is proper, because your faith grows exceedingly, and the charity of every one of you toward each other abounds. So, I think people can have more or less faith because your faith can grow. The next question comes from Robert Bayless. I didn't mention where he's living. He said, you asked for questions. Well, I'll ask a couple. In Mark 5 and Luke 8, the legion of spirits asked Jesus not to send them out of the country or into the deep. Mark one way, Luke the other. Now, when the stricken swine stampede into the water and drown, they become disembodied spirits, free to wander and possess another person. If there are two states, spiritual and physical, putting aside the spirit prison for the moment, I'm not sure what he means by that, does that mean out into empty space where they are somehow not able to return? Well, there are some scriptures to look at. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, Peter writes, for if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, I suppose this is what he means, is some sort of a spirit prison, and Jesus went, we're told, and preached to the spirits in prison. But here we have an example of where they are in darkness. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 16, he talks about one being rebuked for his, or Balaam being rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with a man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. These people causing trouble, are wells without water, clouds carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. It's another one of those scriptures that seem to sound like the evil spirits being cast not merely out or off out of people, but clean off the planet, which is not unreasonable. Then there is Jude chapter 1, verse 12, speaking of the same kinds of things. He said, these are spots in your feasts of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withers, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. raging waves of the sea foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Now, this is a very strange, in fact, Peter and Jude both have some really strange remarks about the angels that sinned, about demonic types of spirits. And the way it reads in Jude, they seem to be, if not possessing of individuals, at least influencing. They come to us, and I think they have to come to us with people because they come into our feasts and they eat with us. But then he calls them clouds without water, blown about by the wind, trees whose fruit withered, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Somewhere in here he seems to move over into the spirits that are involved, not the human beings who are doing their bidding or doing their work. Wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. I suspect that these incidents lie behind the depiction in the first Superman movie. You may recall it, the first of the modern Superman movies, where some miscreants, criminals, who are apparently immortal, are locked into a two-dimensional prison and sent spinning off into outer space in the movie. Beyond these scriptures, we really don't know anything about what happens. The impression, it's not that God cannot destroy what he creates, but at the same time, it does seem like these wicked spirits are not destroyed, but they are sent out into the blackness of darkness forever, which sounds a lot like space. Robert continues, I expect this is one of the times we're not given enough information to come to any type of conclusion, but then it's very probable that I am missing something, just as I'm sure you have been asked this question before. Well, I suspect you're dead right. We can speculate, but we really don't know anything more than what the Scriptures reveal, and we try to connect the dots on it and make a picture out of it. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. He went on to ask, he said, on another note, what is your take on Jesus missing 12 hours? It is generally accepted by us that Jesus rose Sabbath sunset, yet early Sunday morning he told Mary he had still not ascended to his Father. What was he doing during this time? There seems to be nothing in the four Gospels to explain this. Well, no, there isn't. And since there's nothing in the four Gospels to explain it, you're asking me to explain it? I'm joking. Where do we look for the answer? Well, we look in vain because we are simply not told. Perhaps there is something in the overnight preparation of the wave sheaf that serves as a type because, they had to go through, they had to thresh it, they had to toast it and do all these things to prepare it. Maybe Jesus needed to be prepared for presentation to his Father. Maybe he wanted a little time to think before he met his disciples. There were no witnesses to tell us. Jesus did not see fit to tell us, and so we're kind of stuck. Here's your memory verse for the day, and it's an easy one to remember. It's Deuteronomy 29:29. Just remember that, Deuteronomy 29:29. It says this. Memorize it. You're going to use it a lot. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. Now that should be easy to remember. We ought to invoke it a lot, because it's precisely where we are when we come to questions like that. The secret things belong to God. Those things which are revealed belong to us and our children. Why? So we can do them. Now, it's not to say that we shouldn't inquire, but that we should be looking at the big picture and not being distracted by brushstrokes in the painting. You know what it's like. You see a really fine work of art, you have to stand away from it and look at it and draw the impression of what the artist is trying to say. You get up real close, get the magnifying glass out to look at the brushstrokes, you're missing the big picture. Okay, we're a little shorter today in the program, only 2 questions, but not enough time to go on in Ezekiel. Remember to send your comments and your questions to me at ron@borntowin.net.